Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. Go around the room and say our names, and then I'll introduce Matthew. I'm George.
My name's Cass.
I'm Jeff.
I'm Juan.
Evelyn.
Clint.
Stephen.
My name is Jerry.
Jim.
Bob.
Michael.
Bob.
Tony.
I'm Richard.
Noel.
Jack.
Michael.
I'm Tom.
Steve.
I'm Brad.
My name is Henry.
I'm Terry.
Hi, Terry. I'm not sure I can read this. If I can read this, I can. The print is so small. Matthew. I never knew how to pronounce your last name. Perifano. Him is a longtime member of the Gay Buddhist Fellowship and currently serves on the board. He is grateful to be given this opportunity to share his love of Shakespeare and the Dharma with GBF. Matthew recounts his rich and strange journey with Shakespeare that began with a reading group that approached Shakespeare as mind-body practice rather than as theater. Eventually, this reading group would form Birmingham Wood Musical Shakespeare Company, and Matthew would discover his facility for setting Shakespeare's verse to music. Welcome, Matthew.
Well, that about sums it up. Any questions? I can't tell you how strange it feels being up here. It's like some weird variation of the actor's nightmare. But along with that introduction, we're going to be talking. I'm going to be talking about the power, the transformative power of language, and of course, how many people love Shakespeare? Oh, good. Okay, good. How many people have never really connected with Shakespeare? Don't be ashamed. Yeah. So I'm always kind of promoting Shakespeare, especially through these kind of informal readings that I've been doing over the course of the last 50 years. But also this. So I am going to do a little crash course on blank verse and what I feel is so wonderful about the language in Shakespeare's plays. But also, fundamentally, this is a talk about meaning and how meaning evolves and changes through our experience. And so, talking about meaning and definitions, Dharma. Dharma has many definitions. I was looking at an article that said it was listing the 16 definitions of Dharma. For me, it has 4 basic definitions. And first, Dharma is truth. Second definition for me is Dharma are the teachings. A third definition for me is Dharma is the practice or the path. And fourth, and most importantly, Dharma is one of the 3 refuges of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So a lot has been written. I'm not the only person who's made connections between Shakespeare's work and Eastern philosophy and thought. There are quite a few really good books. I don't know if they made it onto the chat, but there's Shakespeare Meets the Buddha by Edward Dickey, and this is it's organized by impermanence, different concepts, love, compassion, joy, and then it lists selections from Shakespeare that mirror that. There is The Buddha and the Bard, where Shakespeare's stage meets Buddhist scriptures, by Lauren Shuffran. And then there's this wild book called Lacking Buddha by Mark LaMonica, The Mysterious World of Shakespeare and Buddhism. And it's really a wild ride. It's very provocative. He even kind of asserts that Shakespeare was a reincarnation of the Buddha. I wouldn't go that far, but it's a fun book. And then we have our own David Rico, who was speaking last week here. And he has a lovely book called To Thine Own Self Be True, Shakespeare as Therapist and Spiritual Guide. And there's a quote from the introduction to this book that I just love because it really speaks to the kind of connection that I have with Shakespeare that I've developed over the years. And so David writes that Shakespeare takes us one step further. We go beyond mere understanding of his words or even grasping its insights. We notice that his words touch us personally, evoke our feelings, become directly meaningful to our present life circumstances. Meaning is participatory. It happens between humans, in this instance, between Shakespeare and us. It is this experiential empowerment that makes the transmission from Shakespeare to us deep, lasting, and significant. So, my association with Shakespeare goes back to my my undergrad days at San Francisco State, and my experience and my association with Buddhism is much more recent. But one of the things that I found is the more I learned about Buddhist scriptures, Buddhist teachings, the more they would remind me of things that I'd come across in Shakespeare. So I'll give you two cases in point. And one of them, for years, my favorite quote of Shakespeare comes from Cymbeline, which is one of his later plays, this sprawling fairy tale that has almost every plot device that was ever in a Shakespeare play crammed into this one play. It's like, it's too much. So yes, the quote comes about midway through the play when everything, the plot is totally out of control, and Pisanio, the servant, ends the scene, which they often do in blank verse. In blank verse, which doesn't rhyme, they usually end the scene with a rhymed couplet. So he just kind of throws up his hands and says, "All other doubts by time, let them be cleared. Fortune brings in some boats that are not steered." And I love that. It's really, most of my life has what?
Can you repeat those two lines?
Yes. All other doubts by time, let them be cleared. Fortune brings in some boats that are not steered. And that has, really been emblematic of most of my adult life. That there's so many instances where good fortune has superseded good judgment. In so many instances. Okay, a few years back, I took a Year to Live workshop. Through Spirit Rock. It was the lead teacher was Vinnie Ferraro, and also with ample help from Frank Gostaszewski, who his beautiful book, The Five Invitations, and both of them have spoken at GBF. And in fact, that's how I finally, my first exposure with Vinnie Ferraro was here. And at some point, there was a discussion. It must have been around the idea of control, or how we try to have kind of a sense of control over our lives. And Vinny talked about when he was a little kid, his favorite ride at the amusement park was a car that ran along the track. And so the car's running along the track, and he's at the steering wheel, and he's steering furiously to the left and furiously to the right, even though it's not doing a damn bit of anything. And I just love that image. I think most of our life is like that. I wouldn't go so far as there's the track that starts at birth and ends in death, and that we're just like pretending like we're in control along the way. But the second instance is in A Year to Live is based on the book by Stephen Levine called A Year to Live. And one of the chapters in it is called Name That Tune. And it talks about how in different indigenous cultures, young people set off on a vision quest. And one of the things that happens in that vision quest is they find their heart song. And it's something that they keep with them, and that is there to be sung during their final transition. And so Stephen Levine encourages people to find your heart song, and I went, oh my God, I wrote it, I've already written it. And so it's the first Shakespeare I ever set to music as a member of Burnham Wood. And it's a funeral dirge from Cymbeline, and it begins with, fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thou thy worldly task hast done. Home art gone, and ta'en thy wages. And I just thought, thou thy worldly task hast done. Home art gone, and ta'en thy wages. That's it. That's my song. It's because I think it's such a nifty little definition of karma. And it also, yes, it just especially, reminds me every morning when I make my coffee or tea, I recite the 5 remembrances, and the last of the 5 remembrances is my actions are my only belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground on which I stand. So, home art gone, and ta'en thy wages. So this is the song. Consummation have I was wondering what was going to happen. Do you applaud or anyway? Okay, yeah, I guess it's okay to applaud. Okay, moving right along. So, how did I get to be in this Shakespeare troupe? I never connected with Shakespeare in high school. Although we did do some stuff from Midsummer Night's Dream in theater class, which was a lot of fun, but academically. Now, when I graduated from high school, I decided I went to San Francisco State because they were the only ones that would accept me, and my parents were really glad that USC didn't accept me, and so I decided I was going to be an English teacher. You know, oftentimes people are inspired by a wonderful English teacher that they had in high school, and they want to, it inspires them to become an English teacher themselves. No, I wanted to be an English teacher because of this man. His name is James Franciscus. He played an English teacher in a television series called Mr. Novak. Now, the only reason why I'm even bringing this up is I just want to give you a kind of sense of my level of emotional maturity at that stage. Okay, so anyway, so the thing about being an English major was you had to take a Shakespeare class, and I kept on avoiding every semester taking a Shakespeare class until I heard about this very special Shakespeare class that was 6 units instead of 3. And it was taught by a man named Edward Van Alstyne, who was known to friends, family, and students as Van. And his whole approach to getting people to connect with Shakespeare was by breathing life into it, acting it out loud, moving around, gestures, props encouraged. And so it was a lecture class where we divided up into smaller groups, which would meet for those 3 extra units. We would meet outside of class and act out whatever play we were studying that week. And our final project was we divided King Lear up among the class, and we all put it on, with books in hand, for our friends and family at the clubhouse down in Stern Grove. And I got to play Lear at his maddest, so I, talk about cathartic, and I was hooked. And I must have made an impression because Van invited me to become part of a regular reading group that they had. And so I want to take a little time to talk about the readings. This is really the crux of this whole talk, or my kind of portal into my relationship with Shakespeare. And fortunately, one of our members, Mark Reese, wrote his master's thesis in humanistic psychology for Sonoma State, and it was called Shakespeare in Everyday Life, and it was about us. It was about Birnham Wood. But there wasn't any Birnham Wood at this point. But he did write about the readings, and he described how the readings were in social situations with food and drink, and the one thing that we did was we recast throughout the reading, so that the characterization wasn't as important as just kind of entering into the world of the play. And he said. The readers were encouraged to suspend any preconceptions and to allow the text to direct the flow of meaning. One stretched out, exaggerated, and abandoned oneself to the extremes indicated in Shakespeare's language. In Hamlet's advice to the players, it's just great advice about just speak the words. And there's a whole kind of, there's a whole approach to Shakespeare called original practice. The thing about Shakespeare's language and words, you can speak them any way you want, but it's kind of fun to let them sort of speak you. And we didn't have like a warm up, as far as we didn't do acting warm ups before the readings, but we would just spend some time with our breath and our body, and just to get centered and grounded. And so this is Mark's description of the reading experience, which really kind of takes it. It's like just a little something other. I do want to acknowledge Mark Reese, who died in 2006, but he went on to become a very close associate with Moshe Feldenkrais, and became one of his first trainers in America, and went on to write his biography, A Life in Motion, which he unfortunately was not able to complete because of his death of cancer in 2006. But another member of our troupe, Clifford Scood, helped edit and finish the book. But this is what Mark had to say about our readings. By reading aloud and acting out Shakespeare's language, we inhabit the universe of his plays and bring Shakespeare into our everyday lives. Open and quiet receptivity permits the world of the play to reveal its riches. Only when we ourselves are quiet may this world be heard. Stillness must proclaim the verse. We lend the text our ear by reading the play aloud. We lend the language our body and our voice in order to realize the music and movement of the worlds within the plays. By listening to each other, we establish a world among ourselves sufficient to share the worlds of Shakespeare's plays. The plays, in turn, offer themselves, sharing their landscapes, characters, and meanings. By dwelling in the world of Shakespeare's language, we come to a knowledge of another reality, another knowledge of ourselves. And there are two other quotes that really kind of touch on the same kind of spirit. The one is from Peter Brook, the great stage director, from his book The Empty Space. He says, we may make a personality cult of the conductor, but we are aware that he is not really making the music, it is making him. If he is relaxed, opened, and attuned, then the invisible will take possession of him. Through him, it will reach us. And it's that same kind of open, attuned receptivity that was a hallmark of the way we approached the readings. Then there's also Kristen Linklater, who has developed a whole voice system or voice training. She worked a lot in theater, a lot with Shakespearean Company in Lenox, New York, and she has a book called Freeing Shakespeare's Voice, which applies her techniques to speaking Shakespeare's language. But I love this quote of her. She says, "Shakespeare's truth, therefore, is different from our daily experience of truth. The scale is large. The scale is larger than our domestic reality. But he does not express his truth in a different language. He expresses it in a different experience of language." So I like those two quotes. So the readings went on for a few years, and then Van and his family moved up to Oregon. I moved down to Southern California for about 3 months. And this was not the age of the internet or texting or smartphones, so that when I got back from my 3 months down in Southern California, I had totally lost contact with everybody in the group. So one of the things that happened was when I was down in Southern California, I discovered Laguna Beach, and eventually I ended up having a really bad case of unrequited love. And so when I came back up to San Francisco, and I would write him letters. People wrote letters back then. It was the only way. I would write letters, and I would never get anything in reply, and I'd write a letter. And so I thought, I'm just going to hitchhike down to Laguna Beach and just show up on his doorstep. Right? So there I am at South Van Ness, at the entrance to 101 at South Van Ness, with my thumb out. And who pulls up but Mark Reese? You see, fortune brings in some boats that are not steered. And not only was the group back together again, Van was back down from Oregon, but they were performing. They had a theater group called Birnam Wood, which is an allusion to Macbeth, right? Birnam Wood, Macbeth is told, well, you'll never die until Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane. And he says, well, that could never happen. But it does, because the army camouflages themselves with Birnam Wood from the branches and Birnam Wood. And so anyway, Birnam Wood, a force of good, I think is a way to look at it. And he said, not only that, but our war, they were doing Henry VI Part 2. And he said, our war work just dropped out. And it's a small part, and you can fill in. And so that was my beginning with Birnam Wood. And we performed lesser-known works around the Bay Area for a few years. We didn't have money for sets, and so music was our settings. And so we had music played throughout the scenes. The musicians and the actors were on stage together. If you were in a scene coming up, you'd put your instrument down and do the scene, or sometimes you just take it with you, or it was very hippy-dippy kind of. And so we continued to do so. And then and then we did some, we never had a real director. And so we decided to have a director, and we invited this guy to come in. We were at that time putting together a production of our one non-Shakespeare production, which was Calderon's Life is a Dream from Spain, the Spanish Renaissance. And he said, well, I'll direct that if you let me choose your next play and let me direct that. So we agreed, and he chose a play we never would have chosen, Macbeth. And then he cast it like we never would have cast it. And I think he ended up sleeping with his Lady Macbeth, much to the chagrin of her boyfriend. So anyway, so here's where I want to just spend a little moment talking about the transformative power of language. I think language has power, right? And it has transformative power, or else what? Kirtan, chanting, would just be a waste of breath, huh? So there are all these superstitions around the play Macbeth. The one thing is, and I love these traditions in British theater, but the one thing is, if you're in a theater, you never say the name Macbeth. Unless you're in a play, actually performing the play. But it's referred to as the Scottish play, or Mackers. But I think I really understand the curse, because we were not professionally trained, and we were vulnerable. We were entering into these realms, these worlds, and we were vulnerable to the power, to what we were conjuring up on stage, so that when we did Twelfth Night, there was a kind of explosion of promiscuity among the members of the troupe. But when we tried to mount Macbeth, that sounds funny. When we tried to mount Macbeth, we couldn't handle it. The troupe fell apart. we disbanded, and members moved up to Oregon. No more troupe, but I continued. I was hooked on studying Shakespeare's verse to music, and so I continued to. I just went through the canon and started studying song text from the plays to music. Then we come to the 80s, and it's said that death is the great teacher, and for many of us in this room, it was AIDS. And for me, I bookend the terrible years of the AIDS epidemic between the death of my friend Mark in 1986 and the death of my friend Peter in 1993. When Mark died, AIDS, the great teacher. This is what AIDS taught me. AIDS taught me to put somebody else's needs before my own. AIDS taught me grief. I had never experienced grief before. I didn't know that it's a physical, convulsive thing. And AIDS also eventually taught me the difference between escape and refuge. So when Mark died in 86, let's just say I did not choose the most skillful and beneficial ways to deal with my grief. It involved numbing myself or cutting myself completely off from my emotions with alcohol, and methamphetamine did a great job of that, but it ended up making a mess with the rest of my life. And fortunately, I was able to kind of work through that and leave it behind. So that when my friend Peter died in 86, I decided that wasn't the alternative, and I decided I want to do something creative, and I turned to Shakespeare. And so I picked up the sonnets. I started reading the sonnets, and the first thing, something they didn't tell you in high school, is the first 126 sonnets are addressed to or about a young man. And the way you can kind of look at it is those first sonnets, I always imagined the poet being commissioned to write these sonnets to a young man to encourage him to get married, because his argument is, if you don't get married, you're going to take your beauty to the grave with you. Your beauty needs to be passed on to other generations through your children until you get to Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And the poet says, there's one other way that your beauty can live on, and that's through the eternal lines to time of my verse. So you can see that if I was going to come up with something called Shakespeare in Love, Gwyneth Paltrow would not be in it at all. Okay? So, but also I found in those 126 sonnets, I found a number of them that spoke directly to what I was experiencing through the AIDS crisis. So back then, and then I looked back at other stuff that I had written, and other selections from Shakespeare that spoke to this idea of love, loss, the impermanence of life, the cyclical nature of life. And I created a song cycle, which we ended up performing at the school. And that was that. And recently, in the last 2 years, I decided to return to it and revise it. And one of the decisions that I made that really gave it it took on a life of its own is when I decided to tell a very specific story about two young men who meet in San Francisco in the early 80s, fall in love, and whose lives are interrupted by the AIDS epidemic, told entirely in Shakespeare's verse. Now, in show business, that's what's known as an elevator pitch, okay? So that's the elevator pitch, okay? And so my friend Joshua, Raoul Brody, and through the generous contributions of time and talents of some friends, we're recording a Shakespeare garden. And I say, it's a concept album, like Tommy and Jesus Christ Superstar and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. But seriously, I would like to eventually, it's going to be an album. It should be completed by the end of the year. I'd love to see it staged. It needs to be staged. The album will be like a silent movie with just the instrumental accompaniment. So let's hear some music. Come on, enough talking. So this is the first track of A Shakespeare Garden. Of course, there's all sorts of lovely little birds twittering and church bells ringing and stuff, kind of ambient thing. But I begin A Shakespeare Garden with the first noble truth from the mouth of King Lear. And then, gosh, I forgot the most important part. And then it's followed by Sonnet 30. I'm so nervous right now. I might have already. Did I tell you about Sonnet 30 yet? Okay, good. So Sonnet 30 was one of the first ones I picked up, and this is the whole gist of the thing. And it begins, when to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. And then I came to this line, then can I drown an eye unused to flow, for precious friends hid in death's dateless night. And something remarkable happened when I read those lines. For precious friends hid in death's dateless night. I suddenly no longer felt alone in my grief. And I didn't have the words for it until more recently. But what I was experiencing that moment was karuna, the second of the Brahma compassion, of the Brahma Viharas, of loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. And that is when I discovered Shakespeare as my refuge. And I saw it as my path, this time, through my grief. So, First Noble Truth paired with Sonnet 30. And in this piece, it's all, everything's kind of, I might introduce a sonnet with a line from some other song. It's all woven together musically, and you'll be able to hear some of the stitching. But thou know'st the first time that we smell the air, we wail and cry. When we are born, we cry that we are come to this great stage of fools. We cry, we cry, we cry. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's ways. Then can I drown and I unused to flow for precious friends hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sign. Then can I grieve at grievances forgone, and heavily from woe to woe tell o'er the sad account of bemoaned moan, which I knew pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored and sorrows end. Sorrows end. Sorrows end. Sorrows end. Okay, well, we're running out of time, but I just had to go through all of that exposition just so that you know how I got to where I am right now. So some more little Shakespeare Dharma. Gosh. Kind of running out of time. I might not have to tell you about blank verse, but one of the things I do want to say about blank verse is that it's an iambic pentameter, and it's 5 iambic beats, and an iamb kind of goes like bum bum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum. And if you think about it, there's another kind of natural rhythm that kind of goes ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum. And so I like to think of the kind of bass of blank verse as a heartbeat, and it's an iambic pentameter except when it isn't. And so oftentimes it diverges, the rhythm or scansion diverges from that heartbeat, that basic heartbeat. And what happens is, I liken it to, in Japanese rock gardens, they change they have varied levels of coarseness in the gravel. And if you're doing walking meditation, you'll hit a new kind of sensation of gravel, and it brings you to the present moment. So when the rhythm, the scansion, diverges from iambic pentameter, it suddenly it emphasizes that thought. There's so much more I could tell you about it, but what's really cool is originally there's prose and poetry, and prose and blank verse in the plays. In the early plays, prose was relegated to comic or low-status characters, and then the high-status characters spoke in blank verse. But as the plays evolved through the years, Shakespeare does these wonderful alternations, and sometimes you'll have a play that starts out in prose and then ends in blank verse. There's a wonderful scene between Viola and Olivia in Twelfth Night where they both start out in prose, and then Viola kind of enters blank verse into it, and pretty soon Olivia is speaking in blank verse, and that's when you know that Olivia has fallen in love with Viola. Because one way you can look at it is prose is coming from the head, and the blank verse is coming from the heart. The other way I like to think of blank verse is like shifting gears and being being a homosexual, male homosexual of a certain age, I can't help but make a musical theater analogy. But, in musical theater, the reason why people sing is because talking just can't cover it, So I think, there are wonderful moments in Shakespeare where it's basically the language is shifting gear into more heightened, energetic language. So now that I've used up all our time talking, but I think you'd like to hear a couple more songs. Okay, so I do want to, my blank verse. Okay, there's a speech. One of the most famous speeches, and As You Like It, is the seven stages of man. But my favorite speech is spoken by Duke Senior. He's overthrown and exiled, and he's gone to the forest of Arden with his band of merry men, and it's rather harsh there. And he gives this kind of pep talk. And he says, "Now, my co-mates and brothers in exile, hath not old custom made this life more sweet than that of painted pomp? Are not these woods more free from peril than the envious court? Here feel we but the penalty of Adam, the season's difference, as the icy fang and churlish chiding of the winter's wind, which, when it bites and blows upon my body, even till I shrink with cold, I smile and say, this is not flattery. These are counselors that feelingly persuade me what I am. Sweet are the uses of adversity, which, like the toad ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in his head. And this our life, exempt from public haunt, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. I would not change it. So that's some Dharma for you. I don't know why I get a little verklempt when I do that.
Where is that from?
What?
Where is that from?
It's from As You Like It. Yeah. So I'm just going to run through some real. Let me see. Death. There's a wonderful thing that I like about death. It's from Measure for Measure. Claudio has been sentenced to death for adultery, or no, not adultery, for getting his girlfriend pregnant, and they're not married. And the actual Duke has given his power over to this guy, and he's a real hard nose. And basically, the Duke is kind of relinquishing his powers so that this other guy can do all the dirty work. But he returns in disguise as an abbot. So he's with Claudio. Claudio's in jail, and Claudio says, "The miserable have no other medicine but only hope. I have hope to live and am prepared to die." And the Duke says to him, in disguise as the abbot, he says, "Oh, be absolute for death. Either death or life shall thereby be the sweeter. Reason thus with life. If I do lose thee, I do lose a thing that none but fools would keep. A breath thou art, servile to all the skyey influences that dost this habitation where thou keepst hourly afflict. Merely thou art death's fool. For him thou labourest by thy flight to shun, and yet runn'st toward him still. Thou art not thyself, for thou exist on many 1,000 grains that issue out of dust." I like to put in there, "For thou exist on many 1,000 grains that issue out of stardust." But I think I think I'm not stretching it when there's this wonderful idea of non-self in that part of it. We've really run out of time. I think I will do just one last number. Okay, maybe. No, I have to end it. So I'll end with probably the most, for me, the most transcendent speeches in Shakespeare. It comes near the end of The Tempest. It's spoken by Prospero. He has just presented this huge masque, huge performance for Prince Ferdinand and his daughter Miranda. And so in the context of the play, he's talking about the masque that has just occurred. But then he's also talking about the play itself. And there's a reference to the Great Globe, which is the Globe Theater, where so there's a reference to that. And then, I think there's just, beyond the situation in the play, beyond theater, there's, I think this touches on the absolute. And then I'll end it with, this is like the penultimate track in a Shakespeare Gordon. So, our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a wreck behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. Thou know'st 'tis common all that live must die, passing through nature to eternity, passing through nature to eternity. The earth that's nature's mother is her tomb. What is her burying grave? That is her womb. And from her womb, children of diverse kind, we sucking on her natural bosom find. Many for many virtues excellent, none but for some, and yet all different, and yet all different. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little asleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Sure.
Do we have announcements?
I have one question. Did you ever make it to the guy and you were attracted to?
Yeah, actually, I did. At a later date, I did hitchhike back down there. And we had a pleasant visit, and that was it. Yeah, but yeah, I did.
Well, I'm host today, so please stay and enjoy the company of the sauna. We have some vegan treats and some hot water for tea. If you have tea, please leave your cup in the sink, and I'll take care of it. I'll be coming around with the Donna Bowl, and the Donna, your generosity helps pay for this space and for honorariums for our speakers, for the newsletter that goes out primarily to people who are incarcerated, and to soon to the revival of the Larkin Street dinners. Is that right?
We're working on it. It's not a done deal. We're hoping it's going to
Okay.
happen. There's no guarantees yet.
Well, hopefully that will be
They're
one of
making
the
the
things
chocolate
that we'll be able to
Yeah.
finance. And there's a sign-up sheet on the credenza. If you'd like to be included in our directory, please fill out the form there. And around 12:30, some people gather at the front door and go out to lunch together. Everybody's welcome to join in that. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Anyone else? Announcements? Tom?
Yes, you may know Eve Decker, who comes here frequently over the years. She has been she conducted Sit and Sing over Zoom throughout the pandemic, which was wonderful. She's resurrected it. Our next one will be next Sunday. It's from 6:30 to 8 p.m. It includes short meditation, songs that she's written all about the Dharma. And it's a fantastic way to vocalize and experience the Dharma physically and sing, and it's really wonderful. You can only hear her sing, not the crowd of all of us out of tune. But I really encourage all of you who know her and like her music and her talks and everything to attend. I'll share it through our Google group. Attendance has been a little low because she's just getting it back up and going and debating whether it can be sustainable. So if you can come and sit in, it would be really encouraging and wonderful, and I would love to see it continue.
Yes, definitely share the link.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
And should we come and give what should we speak in here?
Later this year.
Soon, right?
I think November, yeah.
She's on the calendar.
Anyone else? Richard, did you want to mention the fall retreat?
Yes. We're having the fall retreat at the Land of Medicine Buddha. It's J.D. Doyle is going to be our teacher. It's September 25th to 27th, and registration will open in mid-July.
Thank you. Thank you. So should we gather in a circle for the dedication there?
There we go.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you, Matthew. Now I get it. It's transcendent.
Why I'm queer for Shakespeare.
That was so beautiful, and you're very funny.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.